Massive noise reduction without the weird artifacts, ultra realistic long exposures, cool light trails, and making pesky people disappear. These are what I'm going to show you how to do today with the power of stacking. Stacking is literally just stacking multiple images on top of each other in an editing app like Photoshop or Affinity Photo, and the only things that you need are a camera. I'm going to be using my iPhone, and you need to keep your frame of reference very much the same. So this basically just means keep your camera as still as possible. So obviously a tripod is ideal, but you can do this handheld, which I'm going to do a lot in this demonstration. So let's start with noise reduction, and I mean dramatic, huge natural looking noise reduction without all of the weird artifacts that are usually associated with it. First, I'm simply going to choose my camera settings as I usually would. There's no secret here, there's no special trick, there's no special app that you need to use. All you need to do is literally just keep your camera steady and take more than one photo. And the more you take, the more noise reduction you're going to get. Basically, the magnitude of noise is reduced by the square root of the number of images. So if you have 4 images, noise will be reduced by 50%. If you have 100 images, noise will be reduced by 90%. And if you want to reduce it by 99%, well, you're going to need 10,000 images. So you can literally just stand there and press the shutter over and over again until you have the amount of images that you want, or you can significantly speed things up by using a burst mode, as I do here in Pro Camera. Cool, so next I want a long exposure of the clouds and the water here. And at this point you might be thinking, Dave, aren't there apps that can do this like Even Longer? Yes, there are. But this is for the people who may not have access to Even Longer. Maybe you don't have an iPhone or something like that. Plus those who are using a traditional camera who might not have an ND filter. And the technique here is basically the same. Just keep pressing the shutter over and over again. But this time I'm gonna highly recommend using a tripod and an intervalometer. Again, I'm using Pro Camera as it has an intervalometer built in, and you want to choose the number of frames and the intervals based on how fast your subject is moving. These clouds and water aren't moving fast at all, but they are making progress across the frame. So I'm gonna choose to capture 100 frames with 1 second intervals. So it's gonna capture 1 frame every second for 1 minute and 40 seconds. And that should give the clouds a chance to move across the frame and create some decent motion blur. Now you can use this technique for faster moving subjects like waterfalls and moving cars and things like that, but I wouldn't recommend it as you do get gaps in the motion blur. It's not the smoothest, but if you do want to try it, I recommend using a burst mode again so you can fire off as many shots as quickly as possible. Next, let's capture some light trails, and in order to do this, again, it's pretty much the same technique, except this time you need to capture actual real life light trails and you need to be quick. To capture real life light trails, it has to be dark, which sounds obvious, but if it's not dark enough, even by a little bit, then the effect isn't going to work. The lights need to stand out against the background, and I don't have a screen recording of me actually capturing these photos because I captured it back in August for a different video and I don't know where it is now. Maybe I didn't even capture one, not anticipating this video, but we can go into the metadata of the photos and it clearly lays out how they were captured. With a sufficient amount of darkness, I put my phone on a tripod. I set my shutter speed to 1 second and I set my ISO as low as possible, which for me on the iPhone 12 Pro is 33. I then waited for a vehicle and took 3 photos in quick succession. Check out the time here, 20:56, so approaching 9 o'clock in the evening, and 32 seconds. Then 2 seconds later, I took this one. Then a second later, I took this one for 3 photos. And be aware that this might take some trial and error to get right, mainly because as you approach really slow shutter speeds like half a second or 1 second, apps can really slow down and to a point where they're so unresponsive that like the phone just feels like it's freezing up, and it's gonna really limit your ability to take pictures fast. So for this, I recommend a Pro camera, but here in these examples, they were captured with reflex. Finally, let's make some pesky people disappear. Now, I could use that 100 photos that I captured before because there's people walking across the bridge, which we can make vanish, but I'm going to use a different example where the people are far more of an obstruction in the frame to really better demonstrate how this works. And again, you guessed it, it's the same technique, but this time you just need to give the people chance to move. So you could literally just stand there with your camera and take a photo as people move and things like that. Or again, you can use an intervalometer as I did here. Again, I'm in Pro camera, and this time I set the intervalometer to capture one photo every 10 seconds for a total of 25 photos. And I reckon like 5 seconds between them would have been fine based on how fast the people are moving, but it doesn't really matter. Now let me show you the magic of stacking these photos in Photoshop and Affinity Photo. Just keep in mind that you can use any file format, so you can use DNG, CR2, whatever raw file that you want to use, JPEGs, TIFFs, you know, it really doesn't matter. But the important thing to be aware of is that it will dramatically slow your computer down if you try and do this with TIFF or RAW files or anything like that. So what I do is I edit my photos first, I batch edit them in Lightroom, and then I export them as JPEGs. So here we are in Photoshop, and fun fact, I've already recorded this entire section once before. It took me half an hour, and right when I was done showing you how to make the people disappear, my Mac just bricked, completely bricked. My screen recording disappeared. And if you want to see the moment that happened, click join down below, become a member, and you get access to all of my bloopers. Now let's get into the Photoshop. The first thing I want to show you is noise reduction. So come up to File. You might not be able to see it, my screen recording is cutting it off, but go to File, go to New, Scripts, and load files into Stack. You can choose files or folder. I prefer files, no real reason why. Find your pictures. So these are DNGs that I have saved as JPEGs. No other editing has been done to them. Select them, click open. Now with this amount of pictures, I don't mind aligning, but if you have any more pictures than this, or when we do the long exposure thing, it's really important that you kept your camera perfectly still with a tripod, because if you're trying to line 100 images, 200, 300, your computer is just gonna hate you. It's gonna take ages, literally ages. So yeah, leave this unticked if you have a lot of images and align them later. So I'm gonna tick this for now, and I want to create a smart object as well, very important. So click OK, and then the Mac or your computer is going to do its thing. And after the image is loaded in, I want to zoom in and show you just how noisy this image is. Great, so that's done. And if I just zoom in here before going any further, you look at the noise here. Look at all that ugly noise. Signal to noise ratio is not great. And if I come into our smart object, double click it and reveal the layers within the stack, you can see just how random this noise is. Look at the water. You can see some alignment there happening in the corners and things. And this is how this noise reduction works. It works on the assumption that noise is truly random. And each picture sort of cancels out the other one. That's this simplified explanation of it anyway. But it doesn't matter in this video. I'm just going to show you how to actually do it. So now come up to Layer, go to Smart Objects, and you can go to either Mean or Median. I'm just going to choose Mean and watch the magic happen. So here is the image as we have it now. And here is our magnificent result. Look at this. Look at that water. You remember how it was before? You can see because of the alignment how it was before, and look at that. Not perfect. Again, don't forget our graph shows you how many images you need as to compared to how much noise reduction you're going to get. So this isn't perfect noise reduction. Well, it is perfect noise reduction, but it's not the most amount of noise reduction. But look at that. This is just brought this image back completely. That's definitely usable now. And this process can make the images a little bit soft. It can sort of smoothen out some details. So what you can do, come to your keyboard, press Command J, come up to filter, go to other, go to high pass, type in 1.5. This is a 12 megapixel image, so 1.5 should be okay. And then go to either soft light or hard light, depending on what you want it to look like. So this is hard light, and just look at the extra detail you can see now. If I turn this off, turn it back on again. And if that's too much for you, you can either lower the opacity or go to soft light. You can see the difference there that that's having. So that's just a great quick way you can sharpen images in Photoshop. I actually like the soft light look. I'm going to go with soft light for a change. So that's noise reduction. But before we go on noise reduction, I'm going to show you an extreme example of this. I'm not going to show you on the screen again for time's sake. It is literally the exact same thing that I just did. But here is the before, and I'll include the settings as well. And here's the after. Look at that. This is, as I said, this isn't a perfect result. It's not supposed to be a demonstration of a perfect result. This is a very, very extreme example that you'd probably delete if you saw this on your phone. But I think this technique has made it almost usable. You know, that's debatable, but just look at the before and after. It's quite phenomenal. So let's minimize the Photoshop and let's bring in the Affinity. So here we are in Affinity Photo, and it's a very similar process. In fact, I think it might even be quicker in Affinity Photo. So you want to go to File, New Stack, then you get the same sort of dialog window here. You want to add, and once you have all your images here, again, we can automatically align the images. You do get some extra options here when it comes to aligning them, and just click OK. And Affinity doesn't give you that preview of the layers being loaded in as Photoshop does. You just have this loading one document here at the top, just letting you know that it's actually doing something. And here is our result. So if we go in there, immediately it looks better than it did in Photoshop. I think that's because Affinity chooses the mean blend mode by default. We can actually come up to this live stack group here, and we can hover over each of the averages, and it automatically applies each one and shows you what it's going to look like. So I think that's really cool, and we can actually just open the stack here and see our individual photos. It's also done a better job at aligning the photos than Photoshop did. But you know, which one looks better to you? Let me know down below if you prefer Affinity or Photoshop. The actual process in Affinity, I think it's faster. I'm not sure which results I prefer. They both look great to me. So let's move on to something a bit sexier than noise reduction, and that is long exposure. So starting with Affinity Photo this time, come to File, same thing, New Stack, and now I'm going to find my 100 images that I took of the water and the bridge. And this time I do not want to automatically align images for the reason I said before. So I will click OK, and at this point with 100 images or more, you usually want to go get a coffee, read a magazine, play some CSR Racing 2. But in Affinity, it's done. See, Affinity is actually much faster than the Photoshop, and it's automatically applied the mean blend mode, and look at the result here. That is our long exposure result. Not the ideal weather for long exposure. If there was blue sky with like just one or two clouds floating around, then it would have been a more dramatic effect, but you can still see what it's done here with the before and after. And I think that's a really nice, realistic looking long exposure. And you literally do the exact same thing in Photoshop as we did for the noise reduction. The only difference this time is that you do not align the images. Otherwise, as I said, I'm not exaggerating, your computer is going to hate you and you're probably going to have to restart it, and you will have wasted a load of time. So now let's get on to Motion Blur's cousin, Light Trails, and we'll do this one in the Photoshop. So let's bring back up the shop of photo. Now we're going to come to File. This is a bit different this time. So we are doing 99% of the same thing, but when it comes to the average, we're going to use a different average. We're not going to be using median or mean, we're going to be using the maximum average. So if I find my 3 photos, we're going to align these ones and we're going to create a smart object, click OK. Now here I could have taken more pictures. I could have waited for a car that's like the same as the car that went over to create a longer light trail effect, but it's one of those things. This will perfectly demonstrate the effect that I'm trying to show you. So we go to Smart Objects, Stack Mode, and Maximum. And look at that. How cool does that look? We have really nice, long, smooth, natural looking light trails. The only thing to keep in mind is that you do not get the noise reduction effects that the mean or the median averages provide you. So that's why it's important to keep your ISO low in these low light situations. This is perfectly acceptable to me. The sky is noisy, but it doesn't really matter. That's a great looking photo created by just, as I said, tapping the shutter 3 times on a tripod in Reflex. And again, you do the exact same thing in Affinity Photo and you get the exact same result. And finally, let's make some people disappear. And I will use the Affinity for this. So let's come to File, New Stack, Add, and I want to find my people. So we have some people walking across the bridge here. They are very obvious. They walk right past the frame. I don't want to automatically align the images because there's no need. I was on a tripod. The images should all be the same. And here is our result. And here you should use the median blend mode as opposed to the mean blend mode. So this is the mean blend mode. You can see how the people have appeared. We go on the median and they disappear. You see that? So here's Photoshop's result. It doesn't apply any sort of blend mode, not blend mode, average for you. If I said blend mode by mistake, you have to forgive me, it's stack mode. See, if I go to mean, it's so interesting how much slower this is than Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo is so much faster. Look, again, you can see the people there. And if I switch it to median, then it looks like this. So there you have the people disappearing effect, and I will flash up a couple more examples on the screen for you now. And there is one more thing I want to just mention quickly with the people disappearing. You can see here how the tree hasn't really responded very well to the, did I say blend mode again? I meant stack mode. If I say blend mode, just ignore me, it's stack mode or average. It's the median average, not the median blend mode. You can see how it's not responded very well to the median blend mode, and things like flags and moving trees and stuff will do that. Even if you're not going for a long exposure effect, you will get this long exposure blur ghost sort of effect. And to get around that, you could bring in one of the original files and just use it however you want to cut it out. I use the clone stamp. Maybe it's not that bad like it isn't here, but if it is bad, you can just use one of the original files. So that is the power of stacking in Photoshop and Affinity Photo. And I think having this in your locker as a photographer, whether you use a traditional camera or a phone like I have, it's just going to take your photography to the next level and just empower you with the power. Empower you with the power. And it's going to allow you to capture like decent usable photos that don't look like other people's, whereas previously you probably wouldn't have bothered. So there you go. If you've enjoyed this video, then let me know in the comments below. Like the video, share the video, all that usual good stuff. I don't care if you subscribe or not. Subscriptions don't help me whatsoever. Just being real. Joining my channel would be a great thing for you to do if you want to support me though. Right. Go out, take some photos. Show me what you can do. Tag me on Instagram. We'll do whatever you want to do. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm going to go now before I keep waffling. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, stay curious, and back around.